What's up, fantasy champions? Spotlight Sports Network is excited to tell you about an amazing deal from Thrive Fantasy, your place for daily fantasy sports and esports. Right now with promo code SS Network, Thrive Fantasy will match up to $50 of your first deposit. So go to thrivefantasy.com and sign up now with promo code SS Network. That's thrivefantasy.com, promo code SS Network. Do you like the Oakland A's? Are you a fan of the Golden Knights? Do you love the Los Angeles Chargers? Well then, my friend, you're in the right place. This is the Snake Sports Talk Show with your host, Jake the Snake SIlva, brought to you by the Spotlight Sports Network.
Well, all right, ladies and gentlemen, it is that time again as we are back and we are live in Las Vegas. This is the Snake Sports Talk Show. Wherever and however you may be watching and listening, we're live on all platforms: Facebook, YouTube, Twitter, Periscope, and of course on Twitch. Happy to at least be back here with you guys here on this special episode here on a Monday night. In fact, the sun's barely even going down here up in the Vegas Valley, and that's basically how it usually is during the summertime. We start to get at least late amount of sunsets and stuff like that. So what's going on, Landons? What's going on, Major Sports? What's going on, B. Al? Good to have all of you guys here tuning in because I've got a lot to talk about, and I do appreciate every single one of your guys' patience. I know that it has been a while since the last episode itself, but there were a lot of adjustments. There were a lot of different changes, but it's been really, really good. And by the way, we've also had a lot of different stuff go on. But first off, congratulations to the Baylor Bears basketball team. They've done a fine job against Gonzaga, and it's unfortunate that Gonzaga comes up short once again. And they just could not be able to get the job done. And also, too, we had WrestleMania this past weekend. I hope everybody also enjoyed it. I know it had been, kind of the off and on kind of thing with, just the way that things kind of went down and whatnot. But still, it was a heck of a showing. But so anyway, guys, I want to definitely get into this because I think that this is something that a lot of people have been asking for of my opinion with this. But I just want to end up starting out with this. When you think about certain situations in your life, whether it's jobs, whether it's relationships or whatnot. And I kind of utilize this as more of just a relationship tool because this is just an experience of mine that I have been able to go through. And now I'm really looking at it this new year in fresh new eyes of 2021, new life at 26. It's become an incredible journey ride. I've been loving it ever since. But here's the one thing that I will kind of express about this, because the first thing that comes to grips when you meet a certain special someone, the one thing that always attracts you are some of the things that they're interested in, not to mention also some of the things they really do address to the table. And there's a lot more to it. But here's the two stories that I thought are kind of similar. And it adds up to what I'm about to say from here. But the one thing is that both these stories were in toxic situations. Because the fact of the matter is, there's no build, there's no growth, there's drama, there's a lot of things that are just kind of happening on and off the field. And like in relationships, and you want to make them work because it's all about a team effort. It's being on the same similar page. You don't have to be exactly accurate, but you have to be at least similar enough in order for the house to grow. Because you ever hear, the saying for a lot of married couples, happy wife is a happy life. But I say it for a lot of the men out there that sometimes in order to really balance it, a happy spouse is a happy house. It's all about teamwork. And it's all about really building up to the absolutist potentials. That's what it's meant to be. And when it becomes toxic, and it really just kind of gets to the point where I don't really see this working out, because there's so many things. It could be either her, could be him, whatever the case it may be. But it always adds up to where in the moment you are at and what races through your mind. So here's the two stories that I thought was interesting. And of course, for one, that people wanted my opinion on. So New York Jets and Sam Darnold have agreed to part ways. And now Sam Darnold has been traded to the Carolina Panthers, which is very interesting. And this is the kind of situation that leads to one story in particular, because both of them are very similar, same coaches, same aspect, no growth. You remember years ago when Adam Gase was the head coach of the Miami Dolphins, he had one quarterback that was developing for Texas A&M named Ryan Tannehill. This was just before all of this. Tannehill had some interesting stuff. They moved him from wide receiver in college to a quarterback. And that's where some of his draft stock started to go up. So Tannehill is supposed to be somebody that has a good accurate arm, has a good presence, has good eyes. But then all of a sudden, when you really start to get to the nitty gritty, it's like people are saying, Tannehill just isn't that good. He's struggling a lot up in the box. He's struggling a lot, in the pocket. And it's like nothing's working. But then come to realization that Gase then initially got fired from the Miami Dolphins, goes and takes a job at the New York Jets. And the only thing that they could do is, are you still going to develop Ryan Tannehill, or are you going to move off? So Miami makes the decision that they're going to move away from Tannehill. And they initially started with Jay Cutler, then gets to Fitzpatrick, and now here we are with Tua. And now we have a better head coach in Brian Flores, who has a really good defense, and it's really worked out, and it's all about the processes and the builds. Tannehill never even got the opportunity to really building, because all of it just kind of seemed like he was decreasing. He was starting to really not put up the numbers enough. So, and of course, not to mention Miami was missing the playoffs no matter how close they got. So Tannehill instead goes and takes a job with Tennessee and was initially a backup to Marcus Mariota. But here was the interesting part. Mariota gets benched. And now Mariota has at least, a couple years where he was injury prone. And it was kind of the make it or break it deal for Tennessee, whether or not they were sticking with Mariota or they were moving away from him. And after a lot of inaccuracies and so much more, they decided to sit him. Tannehill comes in, and then Tannehill just becomes this different quarterback that everybody gets blindsided by because they were so stuck on Gase and Miami and the development. But he then goes into a stable situation where he's got Mike Vrabel. And at the time, he had Arthur Smith as the offensive coordinator. Now he's the head coach of the Atlanta Falcons. This is an interesting thing. Tannehill moved out of a toxic situation with Adam Gase that it was going nowhere. So then Gase goes to the Jets. The Jets then had they at one point had Todd Bowles, but then they never gave him a chance to really kind of coach it and build. So instead, they go with Adam Gase, an offensive-minded coach. They have Sam Darnold. But what's interesting about this, Sam Darnold was running for his life majority of the time, even for an offensive coach. He was running for his life majority of the time and never really got a chance to really stay comfortable in the pocket. I mean, he's a pocket passer. He's accurate, a kid out of USC. And then all of a sudden, when things started to really get down to the nitty gritty, Gase was the problem. They fire Adam Gase and they bring in Robert Saleh, a move that Joe Douglas initially made that this was going to help to solve their problems. Now Douglas is seeing this through and through. But here's now the one thing. You're doing Sam Darnold a favor. You send him off to Carolina, where Carolina, it's a new ownership, it's new general managing, it's also new head coach in Matt Rule. Everything is shifting. And because what initially was Ron Rivera's era, now he's a head coach for the Washington football team. So a lot of things started to change. Now there's a new change of scenery because of the fact of the Carolina Panthers signed Teddy Bridgewater to a 5-year deal. And now they go and get Darnold, which they're hoping Darnold will be their starting quarterback, and he will build. This is a good thing for Sam Darnold. This is doing him a favor in his career. Because out of all the years he spent with the Jets, there was no development, barely had any offensive weapons, and barely even had protection on the offensive line. They had to address that once they got Mekhi Becton, but still doesn't solve the problems. And Adam Gase, whatever the playbook was designed, didn't work either. If it didn't work for Tannehill, it sure as hell was not working for Darnold. And this is where it really got to the inside. This is what I mentioned with this. Because in the toxicity situation, Adam Gase was the problem. Adam Gase is not really someone that really knows how to develop a lot of these players. He couldn't develop Tannehill. That's why he took a friendly deal with Tennessee. And then in the end, gets a much needed contract extension. He's comfortable with Vrabel. Vrabel trusts him. Vrabel is a defensive-minded coach who puts all of his trust onto the offense, knowing that they are going to make plays, knowing you have A.J. Brown, you have Derrick Henry, but now they got to fix the defense with the secondary. And now with Darnold in Carolina, and here's what's funny about this, that Saleh is a defensive-minded coach. The Jets now are starting to work on pieces defensively and offensively. And of course, with where they sit at, they're going to take a quarterback. Why wouldn't you? They don't really have any other quarterbacks to go through. So, of course, they're going to end up taking quarterback for the future. Probably going to end up taking somebody that's faster, has a strong, accurate arm. It'd either be Justin Fields or Zach Wilson. But here's where the deal was so sweet for Darnold. One, he's getting a developing offensive line that's getting better. He's got offensive weapons. Robbie Anderson. He's familiar with them. DJ Moore, Christian McCaffrey. And what's also nice about this, as a 23-year-old kid out of USC, he's developing along with the defense with Shaq Thompson and with Jeremy Chin. So this is all part of the plan for Matt Rule, a guy that refreshes, a guy that reshapes this organization. And the ownership, let me just be honest with you. This is a new, refreshed ownership. One that really wants to put Carolina back on the map of being a competitive team after the Cam Newton era. And of course, the Super Bowl and Super Bowl 50, but we all know how that went down. So this is new and it's getting better. Think about the quarterbacks that are in this division. Tom Brady, Drew Brees now is retired. From what I'm being told, Atlanta is willing to move off of Matt Ryan. I don't know if that's true or not, but sources are basically saying that they are willing to move off him during this draft. And if that's the case, Atlanta might be in line for a new quarterback. But ultimately in this in this NFC South division, you've got a young quarterback that can develop it. And on top of it, you have a very thorough type of type of head coach. He's very particular with a lot of things. And I think this is all part of this movement. To me, I think this was more of the Jets doing Sam Darnold a favor. You trade him away to Carolina. There's still development involved. The Jets now have to at least get a new breed. They need to get a new face. And this is all just because of the toxicity from Adam Gase. It happened in Miami, happened with the Jets. The Dolphins right now are starting to be competitive. Now, of course, they're saying they are 110% legitimately locked in with Tua. Then you also have Tennessee, where they love Tannehill. He's developing well, and Vrabel trusts him. Carolina now is going to be in a position where all the trust from Matt Rule is going right there to Sam Darnold, knowing he's going to make the plays, he's accurate, and there's going to be a lot of fun with this offense. I don't really see any downside to this. So all I can say is, because a lot of people who think that Darnold is not that good of a quarterback, give him a better offensive line, give him a better play, a better playbook and a better play design. And I guarantee you that if he performs well this next season, a lot of people are going to look back at this and they're all just going to end up, it's Sam Darnold. I mean, we had the Jets and the time of Adam Gase said it. No, no, because we did the same thing with Brian Tannehill. That was so, it's the Dolphins, it's Tannehill. He's not accurate. And we did this with him. Now, all of us that looked at Tennessee as 9-7, 9-7, 9-7, and then all of a sudden they came up with a really good winning record. Are we kind of thinking this too fast? Give it time to develop. I guarantee you, next season, I would not be surprised if Sam Darnold comes out swinging this year. If he really does develop well in Matt Rule's system, I know what everybody's going to say. Maybe it's all Adam Gase. It is all Adam Gase. That's what it's all going to come down to. All right. I find this interesting. And yes, I do pay attention to the NBA as well. But you know what I find interesting? We're in a culture in the NBA now that some teams, there's barely any development in the NBA anymore. I mean, you're getting development in the G League and a couple of other places, or if you're going into one of those organizations that are not as popular, they don't draw a lot of free agents, but they're all about developing young kids. We're in this position where now a lot of competitive teams much rather boost the team to going and getting superstars. So here's what's interesting that I think we will very much touch upon by the time the playoffs start is the Brooklyn Nets. I mean, you're looking at it front and back. They look like they are buying themselves into a championship. Do we buy ourselves into a position and a job? Do we buy ourselves into something that in the end is just going to end up, in the end, we're going to get this accolade. We're going to be good. And I don't even think we see so much of competition in the NBA anymore. Why do you think that some of these other teams like the Lakers and LeBron James and a bunch of these, Utah, a lot of these other teams, all I can say is this, because a lot of people are starting to put together the Nets, they're bringing in, they got DeAndre Jordan, they got Blake Griffin, they got Marcus Aldridge, they got, James Harden, they've got Kyrie Irving, they got, it's kind of interesting because right now, everybody's looking at this Nets team as like a super team. But think about sometimes think about some of these other players. Okay. Only about a couple have won a championship. Kevin Durant, Kyrie Irving. James Harden hadn't won a championship. He was very close to even getting himself into a championship the second he had Chris Paul in Houston. Now Houston's obliterated. They've now become an absolute laughingstock, and it's terrible. Then here's what's interesting, Mark, here's what's interesting about, DeAndre Jordan, part of Lob City. I mean, think about the Clippers team. Clippers team was all about Lob City, but the development in it just didn't work out. They couldn't even get past the second round of the playoffs. I mean, that's how hard that the Clippers were really just outdoing themselves. Right now, the Nets, with Kevin Durant, Kyrie, James Harden, DeAndre Jordan, and Blake Griffin, and a lot of these other players, it's like they're trying to buy themselves into a championship. Last time I checked, really to getting yourself into a championship all has to come from chemistry. It all has to come from making sure, things got to click. Because the Nets may be an overpowering offensive team, but when it comes to defense, are we sure about them really being legitimate enough of winning a championship? I look at some of these other teams, and look, a lot of people can say, LeBron started this whole thing. The Miami team was one that was really interesting. Chris Bosh and Dwayne Wade and Shane Battier and Ray Allen and Mario Chalmers, Donis Haslam. They had a lot of role players off their bench, and they only had a good coach that made his way back into the finals again, and Eric Spoelstra. I told everybody, he's not that bad of a coach. He's just got to have at least the right personnel with the right guys, and now having Jimmy Butler and a lot of these guys, Bam Adebayo, this team is really looking good. That's why Miami is in a position where they would be competitive in the next couple of years. And look at all these other teams that are defensive-minded. I mean, this is what's interesting to me. When people rant and rave about the Brooklyn Nets, yes, they are a really good team. Yes, they can generate a lot of points and such. But when you get to those tough, grinding moments in the game, now I know you're going to get experiences from a lot of those guys. But how far is that really going to go until somewhere somebody's going to end up figuring you out? And again, a lot of people have spoke their minds. Stephen A has spoken his mind about Kyrie. A lot of people have spoken their minds about, all of this and that. So all I can say is that I think the Brooklyn Nets are a good team, but I just feel like we're overhyping them too much. They'll put up numbers, they'll put up points. They're really good. But I don't think at this point, when they're buying themselves into a championship, is one that you'll really look at and go, I don't even think that they're that defensive. I've seen teams that actually have worked their ways with what they've got. And this is what's interesting. When you think of the Lakers, and everybody kind of looked down at the Lakers the second that the bubble went. But LeBron and Anthony Davis was able to make that work, and they had a really good bench. They were able, and they even got better with it. The second they get Dennis Schroeder and Montrezl Harrell, this is a team that they've got a lot of really good role players. You don't just win the championship strictly by superstars. You got to have at least a good bench too. These are some of these things that I'm sure, looking down on the road, when you look at Brooklyn, this is championship or bust for them. I mean, good luck. Good luck. But when you start to get smoked by some of these teams that are real good defensive and they could figure you out in a heartbeat, it's not going to be that simple and easy. Coming up next, I've got a lot of things that I could, that are going on here on my plate. So I'll be recapping at least the NHL trade deadline that happened today. And there were a bunch of moves that I think are really good. And here are at least a couple of teams that I'll even mark down. And then for my best for last, you guys are going to love this because finally, and of course my network could even acknowledge, I'm finally going to be doing my first ever NFL mock draft. And it's only going to be for the first round. And I'm going to give you at least a bunch of breakdowns upon that. And you'll actually see that here up on this screen. And all of my thoughts and everything that I will put in to the mock draft, that'll be coming up on my best for last, coming up here on the Snake Sports Talk Show. So, guys, for all of you fantasy gurus and geeks about there, coast to coast, far and wide, you guys love fantasy sports, including esports, and you guys also love winning cold hard cash. Well, there is an app for that you could sign up for, download on your mobile device through Google in the App Store. It's called Thrive Fantasy. So Thrive Fantasy, what's fun about this, there's buy-ins all the time. And there's also a lot of different pool plays. In fact, it actually got red hot the second that we had the Masters. And I hope a lot of you guys ended up watching that because, man, it's always fun watching golf in Augusta, Georgia. It's beautiful. It's gorgeous on that grass. But there are buy-ins for golf. There's buy-ins for baseball, for basketball, and so much more, and including esports. That's the latest and greatest thing so far. So definitely buy in, because the pool plays, you could be winning up to 15 grand at any time in any of those pool plays when you enter in and you compete, and may the best winner win. And when you sign up and put in your first $20 deposit, use promo code SS Network. That is short for Spotlight Sports Network, because Thrive Fantasy will promise to match it up to $50 into your first play. So you get a $30 bonus the second you end up going in. How awesome is that? Go online and download the app, Thrive Fantasy, promo code SS Network, thrivefantasy.com, promo code SS Network.
But I know that's just in my mind. I know everything is just in my mind. Do you really want to be famous? Do you really want to be a superstar? Do you really want to get dangerous? Do you even know where the groupies are? Bitches out here be...
Welcome to Hammer's house.
All righty. Well, I hope all of you guys have had at least a great weekend, and of course, watching at least a little WrestleMania. Of course, our good friend Mal Gooley in the Gooley Zone, where he's got all Chicago sports, Bulls, Bears, Blackhawks, and of course, the Chicago Cubs. And he's a diehard wrestling fan and with a lot of really good wrestling content. So definitely check him out at the Gooley Zone here on the Spotlight Sports Network. Also, my good friends, one that covers all New York Jets content to all of you New York Jets fans out there far and wide. Definitely check out Gangrene David for all of his New York Jets content. Also, check out Key in the Building. She's got you covered in all Philadelphia sports, Flyers, Sixers, Phillies, and the Eagles, with all of the latest news, highlights, and so much more in all Philadelphia sports. That's Key in the Building. And finally, our good friend, Jeff Hammond, a.k.a. Hammer, and the one place for all of you Mets and Raiders fans where you guys could love content, love entertainment, and so much more at the one place that you get it all, at Hammer's house. So, it's really been interesting during, this whole NHL trade deadline. And I thought it was really, really good. There were a lot of moves that were made. And I can only tell you this, that you still have a bunch of really good competitive teams out there that even after the trade deadline and such, and so much more. I mean, this was actually a pretty good day for NHL trades. I thought this was very impressive. There were a lot of different trades from here, and there were a couple of them that really caught my attention. So the Capitals have really been making some interesting moves themselves. And one thing's for sure, the Capitals, they ended up acquiring Michael Raffl from the Philadelphia Flyers, and they ended up acquiring Anthony Mantha, which was a big fish for Toronto. They're getting themselves a real good defenseman. And on top of that, they're getting rid of one of their youngsters, Jacob Vrana, which I thought was really interesting because I thought for Vrana, he was a guy that was all about youngster development. And I think he was a really impressive forward. So Detroit is really going to get themselves a good forward. I think one that's really going to build up well for a lot of the guys, for Dylan Larkin, and for so many more. So ultimately, wasn't really wins or losses whatsoever with this trade, strictly with the Capitals and with Detroit at all. The Winnipeg Jets ended up acquiring Jordy Ben. They're getting themselves at least a real good player, at least a good role player for the Jets, knowing exactly the position that they are in currently through the stretch of this season. Now, the Canadians, here's what's interesting. There are a couple of teams that really catch my attention from here. The Canadians, the Avalanche, and Tampa. But there were also at least a couple of them that were like little hidden trades here and there. So the Canadians get Eric Gustafsson, a defenseman. Real good one. Everybody remembers him from Chicago, moved on, ended up going to Calgary, then takes a deal with the Flyers, and then now he ends up in Montreal. And Montreal made at least a couple of other moves. They ended up getting John Merrill from the New Jersey Devils. And they were making an awful lot of really good trades. So something tells me about Montreal that I think a lot of people don't realize. Because earlier ago, they get Eric Stahl from Buffalo. And things are not looking hot whatsoever. In Buffalo. Buffalo just looks absolutely ridiculous. It's embarrassing. It's just it's bad. It's absolutely bad there. And now, a lot of these other players, who knows, Jack Eichel might end up being gone out of Buffalo. You're looking at this entire development right now for this organization, and it's bad. It's just all bad. They cannot figure it out. I don't know what it is, but Buffalo is just one of those laughingstock organizations that when are they going to get competitive? When are they ever going to start turning things around? So Montreal, they made at least a bunch of good trades. And on top of that, there were a bunch of other teams that were kind of sneaking in. So a little bit of Chicago. I mean, they get Brett Connolly from Florida, get at least they got at least a real good package deal. But you know who I think is going to be really tough? The New York Islanders. They got Kyle Palmieri and Travis Zajac. I told guys, I said, these guys look very serious into going and winning a championship and maybe making a lot of noise in that Eastern Conference. This is a team that, since the John Tavares signing in Toronto, this team has been nothing but defense. And they've been really good with goaltending. They've also been very smart with their shots. And I think you're really seeing a competitive team where they're going all in. They're going all in on their chips, and they're really relying on everybody in this organization to really do well. That's why I think, and think about it. This is a team that won 4 championships in the 80s. It was a complete dynasty. So seeing the Islanders and where they sit at right now is unbelievable. So the Colorado Avalanche, they go and get Patrick Nemeth back from Detroit. Then they go and get themselves another goaltender in Devin Dubnyk, who I think is real good for goaltender depth to helping Philip Grubauer and a bunch of others. Then also they go and get Carl Soderberg, which he had been part of the organization for a while. And so now it just kind of seems like they're bringing the gang back together, and they're hoping that they're going to be the Stanley Cup favorites, because that's what it was during the start of the season. Colorado was meant to be the team to making it into the Stanley Cup. And there were a lot of questions on it. But But again, we will have to see exactly how things really pan out for the better, and seeing if Colorado really has what it takes to winning the championship, which they do have a bunch of real good players. I mean, that first line is dangerous, and you've got more and more to add with it. They got plenty of depth. They got really good defense. Now they have depth at goaltending. This is a serious team. This is a serious team that really needs to make it happen. Toronto, I thought, was interesting. They go and get Nick Foligno, the former captain of the Columbus Blue Jackets. He's now a part of the team, and there's a bunch of leadership right now in Toronto. Joe Thornton, John Tavares. They've got a bunch of former captains for their from other franchises that they're a part of this team, and the leadership seems to be grand. So it's interesting how they've really changed that up with the leadership, not to mention rallying around guys like Mitch Marner, William Nylander, Austin Matthews. Maybe this is a team that's really looking up. But again, goaltending, I'll be the judge of that, because who knows how legit that the goaltending is. I can't trust Frederik Andersen to save his life. But they did go and get David Riddick from Calgary, which I thought was interesting. And I thought they were really developing well with David Riddick. But Calgary, I don't know. I don't know what I'm getting with them. This is one that I just don't think they really have the pieces right. So here was two really interesting trades that I thought were great. So Boston acquires Taylor Hall and Curtis Lazar, and they get rid of Anders Bjork. Boston is in a position right now where defense is starting to develop well. This was huge after the departure of Torrey Krug. The other thing is they're getting more depth at the forwards. Taylor Hall needed a new change of scenery. Let me just tell you this. In my honest perspective about Taylor Hall, I seriously think that him and the forward from the Columbus Blue Jackets, Patrick Laine, they both look like overrated players. Because think about it. You have both of them that started in the franchises. Laine in Winnipeg and Taylor Hall in Edmonton. He looked really good with Edmonton. Edmonton kind of shot themselves in the foot, yet they did have Connor McDavid as one big catalyst for this organization. And then they just kind of got lost. Taylor Hall ends up going to New Jersey, wins the Hart Trophy, he's an MVP. But then after the MVP year, he fell off a cliff. He suffered injuries, didn't really put up a lot of numbers. They then trade him to Arizona. Didn't work out there. And, you try to work with Phil Kessel and Clayton Keller and a lot of these. There was just no mesh in the chemistry. There really was not. And then he goes to Buffalo, hoping that this was going to be an even better scenario with Jeff Skinner and Jack Eichel. No, still kind of the same deal. So who knows what Boston's going to get out of Taylor Hall? And hoping that he's going to bounce back. Hoping that he'll bounce back to being at least that speedster that he once was. But again, the jury's still out for that. And then the Pittsburgh Penguins acquired Jeff Carter from the LA Kings. They get a third and a fourth rounder. Pittsburgh's really getting themselves a real good veteran guy. And I think Jeff Carter, who was part of the Stanley Cup championship teams with Los Angeles, the Kings needed to do something about this roster, because right now, and the other thing of it is, Alex Iafallo got paid 4-year contract. So they're relying on their young core of Alex Turcotte, Alex Iafallo, Quentin Byfield, and a lot of these young kids, which I think for some they should. Because the Kings right now, they have been relying on so many of these veteran guys. They have relied on them so much. Like, you still have Dustin Brown. You had Jake Muzzin. You had a lot of these really good guys, but then they all left. They all departed because the Kings just can't seem to find their identity. Now they're a rebuilding franchise. So all in all, I think for a lot of these teams, and especially with the way that the NHL is shaped, I could tell you right now, Colorado's still competitive. Montreal right now is being competitive, and they're really taking it up a notch. Tampa Bay is still Tampa Bay. They're maintaining in the East. But the biggest question are the ones that are fighting for at least a spot. Pittsburgh, Boston, a lot of those teams. The Islanders, I know for sure, are getting super aggressive and competitive. And we hadn't seen that since the 80s. So this is an interesting scenery from here. And of course, a lot of the teams that are maintaining, I mean, Vegas right now, they went and got Matthias Janmark, at least a good veteran forward. Something that I think they'll really use to their abilities. And then, of course, the Capitals. The Capitals always wanted, the last particular laugh, and that's what they're going to get with it. So I think, to me personally, this was actually a pretty interesting trade deadline. But now let's see who the competitive teams will be in the NHL. Time now for the hot press. So, of course, a lot of things that were happening all around in the in the NFL. So earlier, Chiefs assistant Britt Reed ended up getting charged with a felony DWI. So, of course, Britt Reed, for those who have remembered about the DWI charge that happened up in Jackson County, Missouri. This was the involvement in the car crash earlier this year that involved a 5-year-old girl in critically in a critical injury. So right now, not a good situation for him, as he's been charged with that of an intoxication. But this is a big hit. This is a really, really big hit. So from what we were told from Jackson County is he operated a motor vehicle while under the influence of alcohol and acted with criminal negligence by driving at an excessive rate of speed. So Andy Reid, the head coach, and of course the father of Britt Reed, surrendered to Kansas City police Monday afternoon and was released after posting a $100,000 bail. And as part of his bail releases, Reed was ordered to not consume alcohol as the primary item sold. And on top of it, he also must report to a dependency services clinic for pretrial supervision and is subject to a random drug testing and must use alcohol and GPS monitoring devices. So, of course, the crash was initially in February 4th. And this is kind of a hit right there in Andy Reid, and in his family, because of the fact of, this happening, which we're hoping, for the 5-year-old, that things are good. But yeah, it's not a fun thing. It's absolutely not a fun thing. I have come across so many stories about this, and it's sickening. So of course the star wide receiver Julian Edelman of the New England Patriots had announced earlier, at 34 years old, and after spending 12 years in the NFL, all with New England, has decided to have his utmost release and is also retiring from the league. So after being named the MVP in Super Bowl 53 a while back, Julian Edelman is calling it quits. He's putting up his cleats, and he's calling it a career. So a little bit of, just a flash forward with 3-time Super Bowl champion with New England. This is what some of his words that he had said from the end of it. It was a hard decision, but the right decision for me and my family. I am honored and so proud to be retiring a Patriot. It's been the best 12 years of my life. Edelman was limited to 6 games last season because of a chronic knee injury. But he ranks second in the NFL with 118 postseason receptions, only behind Jerry Rice's 151. Edelman was one of those guys. I mean, the miraculous catch in Super Bowl 51. it was really interesting. I just kind of, the whole situation. But you think about it, Julian Edelman's been a part of this development for the New England Patriots for years. Ends his career where it started. And also on top of it, great relationships with Tom Brady. But of course, everybody has a lot of great relationships, but not like this, where you developed in this organization, found a way to really make it work, and that's how New England was able to do it. That's the culture. That's just how they are. And for Julian Edelman, I wish for the absolute best of retirement. What a great career, 3-time Super Bowl champ. I hope the absolute best for him and his family, and great retirement. So of course, this was one of the crucial things that have made a lot of noise in sports and, of course, from around the nation. But in Minnesota, the Twins, the Timberwolves, and the Wild, all of them have postponed their games in the wake of the police shooting of Daunte Wright. So here from Monday following the police shooting of Daunte Wright Sunday night, 20-year-old who had died Sunday after a police shot him in Minneapolis, suburb of Brooklyn Center during a traffic stop. The Brooklyn City Police Chief said the shooting was accidental, as the officer involved intended to fire a stun gun and not a handgun during a struggle with Wright. Police were trying to arrest him on an outstanding warrant. And right now, this is just getting out of hand. This is getting out of hand with it. And a lot of people, there were a lot of civil unrests. There were a lot of retaliations, I'm sure. But all of this has got to get adjusted. The city of Minneapolis and the state of Minnesota. I mean, it's horrifying to watch, but it's also something that they really need to make the adjustments and make serious changes, and hopefully changes for the better. And I mean, again, this is outrageous, but I'm hoping that, everything does get resolved. But of course, from a lot of these different movements and from a lot of these different changes, the world itself will not be the same. I mean, we're just seeing that beyond our very eyes, and we see this here in media and everywhere. But the world itself will not be the same. And it's unfortunate, but the world changes. The world changes almost every single day. And it's just crazy. But I'm hoping that we find a silver lining in the end of it. Finally, on the hot press, Detroit Tigers manager A.J. Hinch reflects on highs and lows of the Astros' tenure in his return to Houston. So the Tigers manager is back in Houston for the first time since he was dismissed by the Astros in the aftermath of the sign-stealing scandal that rocked baseball. These were some of the words from A.J. Hinch. I do have to focus on the good things that happened here. I have a lot of fond memories, incredible interactions with fans and throughout the organization. Some really great times and ultimately a really low time. I kind of embrace all parts of that in my journey through this. I think it will be emotional for me. I wish I had a great quote for the words or the right thing to say about what I'm feeling. I know Jose described it as weird, and it's different coming to the visiting side as the ex-manager is a lot different. I think emotions will kind of be on a full tilt tonight. So, as I've said before, A.J. Hinch was really just the manager who expressed it. He expressed a lot of just what had happened during that time. And I've said this before, that the Tigers are in a position where they're going to rebuild, and they're going to rebuild for the better with all these youngsters and with A.J. Hinch. Now, of course, it's interesting to see how this will really react. But I think ultimately, when you look at it from the other side, again, A.J. Hinch was just doing his absolute best to try to do his job. Came out clean. There was a documentary. There was if you guys look at it, definitely check it out. There was a whole interview with Tom Verducci, one of the best writers in baseball, and he came clean about it. Who knows for the Astros? But this was kind of a moment of redemption for AJ Hinch. And I think at this point, it's a great opportunity. I'm kind of excited for it and hoping that, this Rhodes will tie back into some great memories and at the same time, really redeem himself in his career. Well, guys, that was the Hot Press. All right, so I know a lot of you have been waiting for me to do this and on my best for last, and I appreciate every single one of you guys for hanging in there with me. And finally, the time has come. We are definitely going to be breaking down this NFL's mock draft, my first ever one on this network. And one I've ever done. It's tough. Because I think it's interesting. Real quick, Dark Sage had something really good. I saw the Masters last weekend, and I must say, they need to implement an age restriction for the golfers. I understand the Masters is based on merit, and you get to see some of the sports past legends who help make golf what it is, compete. But honestly, it is beyond sad to see the legends way past their prime playing out. Yeah, I agree. I think there is just a point where there needs to be more talent and there's got to be more development in the end of it. But think about this, though. When I look at Tiger Woods, there's never going to be anybody like him. Not even Payne Stewart, not even Phil Mickelson, not any of them. You would think for guys like Ricky Fowler, for Jordan Spieth, Mike, Brooks Koepka, and a lot of these, these other golfers, you would think that it would be exciting to watch. But as far as for the developments on this, it's just come such a very long way. So, but I'm hoping that there is some real good development in the end of it. And I'm hoping that there is going to be a lot of really good stuff to come at it. What's going on, Spotlight Raiders Talk? Shout out to my good boy, Darian here. Yes, I'm officially back. Absolutely. What's going on, Roy? What's going on, Jay in the Bay? As of course, everything is always good in the Bay when you check out Jay in the Bay. We're all San Francisco 49ers content. He's got you covered from there. So, of course, you guys all have waited for a long time for this, but it's time to initiate this. I now have my first ever NFL mock draft. And this is going to be really interesting for me. I cannot wait to break this down. I'm just excited just looking at this whole thing because I'm looking at, honestly, all of these needs and all the picks. And it's all just strictly up on the first round, folks. This is all just strictly up on the first round. So from 1 through 32, these are all of them from here. So, so this is where we're going to get started up on the draft. And I truly think that there are going to be a bunch of different moves. And I think this may surprise a lot of people, but this is where we're going to get down to the nitty gritty. So without further ado, let's start it off on the Snake Sports Talk Show's first ever NFL mock draft. All right, so first off, of course, we have the Jacksonville Jaguars. And look, it's no secret whatsoever, and it's not even something to really argue about, but they're going to draft Trevor Lawrence. Look, Urban Meyer, Trevor Lawrence, he's honestly one of the best first-round talents. He is a transformative type of quarterback, once-in-a-generation type talent. There's no question about this. And so I truly think that Trevor Lawrence is a beautiful fit for Jacksonville and is a beautiful fit for Urban Meyer. The New York Jets. My thing is, after getting rid of Sam Darnold, this I think is opening up the opportunity. I truly think they're going to go with Zach Wilson. I really do. I really think that at the end of it, Zach Wilson sounds to me like it's their guy. He runs, he's got a good accurate throw, and I think is somebody that a lot of people really attract well. But I'd love to see what Zach Wilson does when he's got Denzel Mims. And of course, he's got a bunch of real good wide receiver core from the look of it. The only thing is that the Jets need offensive line to protect him. But I think also you go and get the best runner in this draft. And that's the way that I look at it with the Jets. So they're going to get their future franchise quarterback. And I think Zach Wilson is really going to fit in well with Robert Saleh and with this Jets organization. So this was interesting for me because I think San Francisco, it's a tough situation, but I truly think they're going to end up getting their quarterback for the future. I think it's going to be Trey Lance. My thing is with San Francisco, they've got a great offensive line. They've got a bunch of real good wide receivers, Deebo Samuel, Brandon Ayuk, and a bunch of others. And they've also got a decent run game with Raheem Mostert. So Kyle Shanahan, he's just at this point with Jimmy Garoppolo. Now, Jimmy Garoppolo is the starting quarterback. That's no doubt. But if you're going to develop a kid for the future, I think Trey Lance is absolutely the guy that they're going to end up developing because you're going to have somebody that's going to be willing to run out the pocket at times, has an accurate throw. I've been watching this kid's pro day, and I think it's been very, very impressive. So I think the 49ers, they're going to go and get a quarterback, and I really think they're going to get Trey Lance. Absolutely. All right, so this was an interesting pick for me. But I think personally, if you look at it, I truly think this would initially be a trade for me. And I truly think this would be a trade with the Carolina Panthers. I seriously think that the Carolina Panthers I just seriously think that the Carolina Panthers, they're going to end up jumping up to the number 4 spot. I really, really do think this is going to happen. I just have such a good feeling with this because the Falcons right now are in a position where they could trade down and going and getting themselves something. So, let me see. Trade. So yeah, I just truly think that the Carolina Panthers are going to go up to 4, trade up, and trade down because at least if you're Atlanta, you're still going to at least get your players there. So I think this is a good thing for them, and I truly think that Carolina, from the looks of it, they're going to get Kyle Pitts, the tight end from Florida. You got Sam Darnold now. You've got all these offensive weapons with Christian McCaffrey, DJ Moore, and Robbie Anderson. They're just needing a tight end that could also be a real good playmaker. And they're still going to get some defensive guys. They're still going to end up getting some help. But I think if you're smart enough, if you're Atlanta, you trade down, move up with Carolina to go and get in the 4, and Carolina's got their star tight end. I think I think this is really just a thing for them. All right, so there have been a lot of talks about this, but a lot of perspectives. I really do think that the Cincinnati Bengals are going to get Penei Sewell, best lineman in this draft by far. And I mean, there are still a lot of really good talents there, but I think the Bengals, knowing you're going to get at least a real good tackle on that edge side. And you got to protect Joe Burrow at all costs. This is why this offensive line needs to get better. So I think Penei Sewell is going to be the absolute answer for the Bengals moving forward. And, of course, is going to end up relieving a lot of those stresses to the fact of I think that the Bengals will have a better offensive line for them. And I truly think that they're going to do this is going to be a really, really good thing for the Bengals moving forward, getting Sewell. So this is interesting. I've got the Miami Dolphins. I think, to me personally, they're going to get the one kid from USC, Elijah Vera Tucker. I seriously think that the Dolphins, when I look at it, I mean, you're going from West Coast out there to the beach side in Miami. It's kind of a similar situation with the sun's out and everything else. And I think Elijah Vera Tucker is probably one guy not a lot of people are really looking at very closely. So I think he's going to thrive very well with this team. And I think this is going to be working really, really well with the Dolphins. And who knows what they're going to do with Tua. But I think for Tua, he's going to get at least a ton of protection from here. So I think Vera Tucker was the smart one. Okay, so the Detroit Lions, they have got to draft this kid, Jamar Chase. They need a wide receiver. Kenny Galladay's gone. And so is Marvin Jones. That's it. They're not going to end up going for any other positions other than wide receiver. They got to help Jared Goff out. I don't think of any other wide receiver that's on this roster at all. So you need playmakers there. And I think Jamar Chase would be the absolute answer for the Detroit Tigers moving forward. I think this is a good thing for Detroit and for Jared Goff to really kind of get themselves back up on the map. Now, of course, it's a lot of development, but I'd like to see how this works. All right, so this is kind of interesting for me in a position because we're back to Atlanta. I think Atlanta is going to be lucky enough that in this particular position, they're going to get themselves at least another corner. I feel like they're going to get Patrick Surtain. I mean, Atlanta needs secondaries. Atlanta needs secondaries badly. I mean, you could talk about the linebacking core and the edge rushers and everything else all you want. But they need to stop the pass game. I mean, you've got Tampa Bay loaded with wide receivers. You've got Carolina that's sneaking in, that they've got their quarterback and that they've got their offensive weapons. So you got to find guys that can stop those pass plays. And then not to mention New Orleans with Michael Thomas and others. It'll be interesting to see what Atlanta does, but I think that their main focus is on the secondary. Now, here's an interesting draft pick here. It's the Denver Broncos. I seriously think that the Denver Broncos are going to get Justin Fields. I do not believe that Denver is not sold on Drew Lock. I feel like Justin Fields is going to develop very well in this organization. This is something that they need to hit this because that's one position they never got right is quarterback. They've got this opportunity now with Justin Fields falling to number 9, I think is an absolute steal. But a lot of people could say otherwise about Justin Fields, and of course because of his value and so much more. But Denver needs playmakers. They need a quarterback that is a big-time playmaker and a play designer. And I think Justin Fields could absolutely be that guy. Dallas, I think this is kind of an interesting, position to really be in. I think that the Cowboys, they need secondaries. I feel like they're going to go and get J.C. Horn. They're going to go and get the kid from South Carolina, another real good secondary guy that can help you in the backfield and who can also just be a big-time threat when it comes to pass plays. Seriously. But I think at this point, because that's all that the Cowboys are struggling in is secondaries. It's the worst. That's why a lot of the games they've lost were because of big-time pass plays. And they couldn't cover him. They could not cover him. No matter how much we look at the Dallas Cowboys for all of this and that, they could not make any good coverages. So I truly think that was exactly what they needed. All right, so we still have at least a lot of real good picks from here and there. So I think that the New York Giants in this particular pick, my thing is I think it's going to be a swap here. I think the Giants. I think the Giants, honestly, they're going to go with their gut, and I think they're going to go and get Rashawn Slater from Northwestern. I think they're definitely going to get the kid from Northwestern, Rashawn Slater. I think he's a really good kid, real good tackle, provides a lot of protection because this is a year now that you get Kenny Golladay and you get a lot of really good players out of free agency. This is not a time to mess around if you're Daniel Jones. This is a time to really get serious. The Giants want to be in the playoffs next season, and they're pushing for it. They are pushing for it aggressively. So I think that Rashawn Slater, and especially on the tackle position, you could utilize this. So I think this really works for me. All right, so Philadelphia. What are their needs? Quarterback, wide receiver, linebacker, corner. For God's sakes, is quarterback really that big of a need for them? I don't understand this with Howie Roseman. I really don't. I truly think that if you're Philadelphia, you go and get Devontae Smith. Because seriously, you lucked out on a lot of players. You lucked out on a lot of wide receivers. Devontae Smith at least could be a breakout wide receiver, is a guy that I think could really make a lot of real good matchups. Now, it's nothing against Jalen Waddle. I think he's a really good guy that could come out and could really be a big-time speedster. But I truly think that you seriously need to look at this very, very carefully with this because they've got Jalen Hurts, okay? He's going to be their everyday quarterback. You already know that the second that Carson Wentz is gone. So quarterback, to me, I would not even worry about until like about the third round of the draft, please. This is just something that I think at the end of it, that's what they're going to make. That's what they're going to make it work. So the LA Chargers at the 13th pick, and I really am optimistic about this, and I'm really excited about it. But I do think that they're going to go and draft the kid Christian Darrisaw from Virginia Tech. This is the most important thing that the Chargers need is tackle. Now, I know they need a corner because the fact of you've got no Casey Hayward. They're going to need somebody to be a shutdown corner at the end of it. I still think I still truly think that Tom Telesco is going to work his magic to making at least a trade somewhere there where he may go and get a corner. Because last year, after getting a quarterback and a linebacker, that was huge. So Telesco really did a lot of really good stuff. But let's see what he does by this next year's draft. So now that leaves me to the Minnesota Vikings. Honestly, I think this Vikings team, I think they're going to trade downward with the Tennessee Titans because the Titans now are going to get the 14th pick. And here's what I think is interesting about the Titans. Now, they do need a wide receiver. They do need a tackle, a guard, and a corner. What was the problem with them last year? They didn't have pass rushers. Now they went and addressed it this year. But I truly think that the biggest one is going to be wide receiver after Corey Davis. I think they're going to go and get Jalen Waddle. It's crazy to me. But I really, truly think they're going to go and get Jalen Waddle. I feel like that they're going to get that guarantee of a wide receiver that is going to be great next to A.J. Brown. Because here's the funny thing. You look at A.J. Brown, the length, the size, the strength, and his catching abilities. People are going to guard him. But then what are you going to leave for the other wide receiver? You're going to leave Jalen Waddle open. I think for a speedster like that is going to love how Mike Vrabel puts this together. I truly think that the Tennessee Titans, that is a steal of a pick. And I truly think that this offense is going to look really good with Tannehill. I really, really do. So that leads me to the Patriots. And honestly, they are going to be looking at quarterback. That is not even a hesitation whatsoever. They're going to be looking at quarterback, and I think they're going to end up. I think honestly, because of just the way that things are. I think they're going to end up going with Mac Jones. I think the Patriots are going to end up going with Mac Jones. Now, a lot of people will say, well, Belichick was there and he shook his head. But again, we never know we never know what goes up in Belichick's sleeve. So I think they're going to end up developing a quarterback at the end of it. And I think they're going to be doing really, really well with it. So I think the Patriots, that was the big thing that they needed. They go and get a quarterback. All right, Arizona. So Arizona, this is interesting to me, but I truly feel like that at this point, they're going to go and get a defensive guy, and I think they're going to end up going and getting Christian Barmore. I think they're going to end up getting that kid from Alabama. He's a real good player. I think it's going to be interesting. I think it's going to be really good with how they set things up. And I do think that this is a developing roster that's only going to get better and it's only going to get younger. So, and with Kyler Murray and, of course, with this defense, now this is a defensive focus and they need to get that offensive line better. So that's what I think that the Arizona Cardinals are going to end up doing. They're going to get this kid. So now this leaves it to the Las Vegas Raiders. Now, the Raiders have a lot of things to address. But after what I've seen from a lot of the videos, I think they're going to go and get Trayvon Moehrig. I think they're going to get that kid from TCU. It's a guy that I think is really, really good. I think he's a guy that covers up a lot of ground, and I think this is the position that is so important for the Raiders, is that secondary, that safety position. Because look, I like Jonathan Abram, I like some of their corners, but right now with Gus Bradley as their defensive coordinator, that's the biggest thing. This is the biggest hole that they have to fix. So I think the Raiders did a really good job of getting Trayvon Moehrig. That I think is going to be the primary. That's going to be the primary position they need to address. So here we are with the Miami Dolphins again. Now this is interesting. So I think, and I'm going to look here real fast, because there is at least one draft available. But I think that the Dolphins, they're going to stick to that 18th pick. And I think they're going to go and get the one kid out of they're going to get Kwity Paye. I really think they're going to go and get Kwity Paye. Kid from Michigan. He's got tons of intensity. And I think of this. Here's what's interesting. You've got Brian Flores that's a defensive coordinating coach, a guy that really knows how to put his foot down. I think this is going to be really good developing for the Miami Dolphins, and it's only going to get younger because the Dolphins right now are making some real good splashes. I think this is a good thing for them. Now this leaves me to the Washington football team. Now, again, who knows how this quarterback position really is going to work well with. But a lot of people are asking me, how did Micah Parsons ended up dropping this low? But I think Micah Parsons is going to end up going to Washington. At least a defensive guy. You're going to get at least the best available from there. And Ron Rivera loves his defensive guys. Ron Rivera absolutely loves it. And Montez Sweat, Chase Young, Micah Parsons, that's a defensive team I want no part of. That's a really, really good defensive team. So now this is going to leave me with the Chicago Bears. What did the Bears need right now? Because they did lock up Allen Robinson for the wide receiver position. I think if you're smart enough, you go and get at least the next available tackle that's right there. I think they're going to go with Walker Little from Stanford. They have got to protect this offensive line. Now, again, these could change. These could change at any time, but I know Chicago would be fighting for a quarterback position, but I doubt it. Especially with the way that, they're positioned at. I seriously doubt that they would even make a move to even make that happen. So it just looks like they're going to be going with Andy Dalton as their quarterback, but they need to protect him. So I think getting Walker Little is probably the safest and smartest thing that they would do. So this leaves me now with Indianapolis Colts. Now, this is an interesting position, but I think they're going to go and get Jason Owe. I think they're going to get that one edge rusher from Penn State after Micah Parsons, because my only thing, I truly think that because they need an edge rusher, they need to at least get more pressure up on there to help with DeForest Buckner and with Bobby Okereke and Darius Leonard. That defense is going to continuously get better and better, and because the offensive line, they're going to get more. They're going to need a lot of help. Not a whole lot, but they're going to need help up on that defense. So isn't this interesting that you got Minnesota back here after the trade with Tennessee? So now we're back here with Minnesota. And Minnesota, after trading back, they're going to go and get themselves. I truly think that they've got to address this secondary, because this secondary is really starting to change. It's really starting to kind of. Well, actually, I think honestly, the corners needed the help, but I do think they're going to get Azeez Ojulari from Georgia. They're going to get the next available edge rusher. They're going to need to fix this defense up. Edge rushers, secondaries, lots of different developments up on the defensive side. Now, this is going to throw people off. So here we are with the New York Jets. Okay, the Jets have moved down this far after the second pick of the draft. And I've been saying this. You go and get your quarterback. They've got one now. Now, it's still developing, but the other position that has really struggled was the running back position. I feel like that the Jets are going to get Travis Etienne. I'm serious about this, guys. I really do. Because they need a capable runner. Because ultimately, you're going to have a redeveloping defense with Robert Saleh. But the run game, since they had Frank Gore and a couple of others, has not been sufficient. So if you're going to be a speed type offense, knowing that you got wide receivers, but you need to have a running back, I think Etienne is probably the best solution for the Jets. So it throws people off. But again, you get at least the best running back that you can in this draft. And I think Etienne, I've said this before, he may be an up-and-coming Alvin Kamara. Have you seen some of the workouts and some of the things that he's done? I mean, the kid's strong. The kid, I think, is going to end up pushing for a lot of yards, but he's also a guy that's good on the catch. So here's an interesting one that really interests me, the Pittsburgh Steelers at 24. So they need a tackle in the guard. They're going to get Dylan Redunce from North Dakota State. They're going to need to end up revamping that offensive line, because that line just got annihilated for Cleveland in the postseason. And ultimately, you got no Marquise Pouncey. You got not a whole. You lost Matt Filer, so they need to revamp that offensive line and get better at it, because Big Ben, he's not getting any younger. It's just getting older and older by the minute. So Jacksonville was able to get their quarterback in the number 1 overall pick. Now they need tight end, tackle, and safety. So I think in this particular situation, I think they're going to go and get Jamar Johnson from Indiana. They're going to get themselves a safety. So they got a quarterback. They're going to need at least a little bit more. But they got to have a secondary. The secondary did not make a whole lot of noise. Now, even though they did get some good developing draft picks last year, but still, this is all about really developing and really making it work from here. So the Cleveland Browns at 26. They need an edge rusher and they need a linebacker. I think that the Cleveland Browns are going to end up getting Jeremiah Owusu Koromora. I think they're going to get that one big kid from Notre Dame. It fills up their linebacker position. They address their secondaries very well. They needed that help. Now it's ultimately just filling in, hopefully having a real good spotter at linebacker, and at the same time, yes, this is just a first-round mock draft. So I think they're going to get themselves a really good player out of this, and that's really going to develop well with this defense. So now I'm looking at Baltimore. So Baltimore, they need a wide receiver. I think the Baltimore Ravens, they're going to get Rashad Bateman. This is a guy that I think was really good for Minnesota, made a lot of real good plays, and was also real good after the catch. So, and Baltimore needs an over-the-top receiver. They need some receiver help for Lamar Jackson because ultimately, outside of Marquise Brown, you really ain't got a whole lot of wide receivers to work with. So I think they're going to go and get Rashad Bateman from Minnesota. New Orleans. So New Orleans, this is going to be very interesting because of just where they are in the cap. I feel like somewhere down this stretch, Marshawn Lattimore is going to be, I think he's going to be traded, guys. And I truly think that by the time he's traded, they're going to go and get this kid, Greg Newsome II from Northwestern. That's my gut feeling, because with this threshold and their luxury tax, it's not good for New Orleans. They are going to have to eat all of it up. So I don't think this is going to be a really, really good thing for them. So, so the Green Bay Packers. The Packers right now, do yourself a favor. Get what Aaron Rodgers wants and needs. Get him a wide receiver. I think Elijah Moore from Ole Miss is going to be exactly the answer. And on top of it, I mean, you didn't even try to get Will Fuller. You didn't even try to get at least some of those wide receivers on the free agent market. How many favors are you going to do for Aaron Rodgers? You know, and if you're in Aaron Rodgers' position, how much more are you going to end up taking from here? So I think this was the right decision for Elijah Moore. The Buffalo Bills. So this, I think, was interesting. But you know what's funny is I think the one big position that they're going to have to fill is the edge rush. I think they're going to go and get Jalen Phillips from Miami. So a lot of people are probably going to criticize me on some of these picks, but I think Jalen Phillips for an edge rush, when you're knowing that you're getting at least a couple of other edge rushers in the middle of this mix, this is one that Buffalo really needs to make a lot of noise on their pass rushes, because Tre'Davious White and a couple of other really good secondaries, they're good. They may go and get one more other corner somewhere down in the lower ends of the draft, but this is something good for Buffalo here. Now this leaves to Kansas City at 31, and I think Kansas City is going to address their problem and get Tevin Jenkins from Oklahoma State. They need to address the tackle. They've already lost Eric Fisher, and they've lost one other offensive lineman. So they need to continuously protect Patrick Mahomes at all costs. So I think this was the right decision to do. So it's interesting to see that. But again, they needed an offensive lineman. I think Jenkins is exactly the right pick, in my opinion. And finally, you have the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. Now, this is interesting for me. The Buccaneers, they've got all the decisions that they can make. But I think they're going to go and get Elijah Molden from Washington. So looking at this whole entire draft, so Elijah Molden, they got themselves at least a real good safety. But think about this. They got all their players back. So it doesn't matter exactly what it doesn't really matter exactly who they end up getting from there. But I know that they're probably going to end up protecting Tom Brady here. And that's where I'm looking at it from here. So, folks, that was my first ever mock draft from here. So, Jacksonville, they go and get Trevor Lawrence. That's no doubt. Zach Wilson to the Jets. I just really do think that all this hype is really going to be on the Jets to going and getting Zach Wilson. Trey Lance, I think, is going to be the right pick for San Francisco moving forward. By the way, I think Carolina going and getting Kyle Pitts the second that they went and got Sam Darnold is one that they needed. And I think really works. It works perfectly. And on top of it, a lot of them ended up getting exactly what they wanted. So Penei Sewell was exactly what the Bengals needed to protecting Joe Burrow. Elijah Vera Tucker for Miami. I think this was a right decision from here. But I thought it was really, really good. Jamar Chase, they absolutely need it. They absolutely need this pick. With Detroit right now, they need playmakers. And the fact that you got Jared Goff still as your quarterback, he can make the plays, but he's got to have weapons around him. So I thought this was very smart. Patrick Surtain ends up going to Atlanta here for their corner position. Denver goes and gets their quarterback. They go and get Justin Fields. And I think this was kind of the right decision for Denver to do, because Denver's already in this position where they are not sold up on Drew Lock. And so they need a different quarterback to really work under and develop him. The Cowboys go and get J.C. Horn. I think he's going to work out very, very well with I think he's going to work out well with Dallas, but they're going to end up having to address more and more issues. Rashawn Slater, I thought, was a real good pick for the Giants. Really needed to work up on that tackle position. But here's the one that I thought was really good. Devontae Smith to the Philadelphia Eagles. Stop playing around. Go and get the playmaker that they wanted and needed. That's what needed to happen. So I think that the Eagles did themselves a favor and really got a good pickup in Devontae Smith. Chargers get Christian Darrisaw, helps with their tackle position. The Titans, of course, moving up and going and getting Jalen Waddle as their wide receiver to helping out to fix the Corey Davis hole. Mac Jones goes to the New England Patriots. I thought it was really good. And then, of course, the Trayvon Moehrig pick for the Raiders, I thought was very impressive. That's one that they really needed. That secondary position with the safeties and corners needs help, seriously. Kwity Paye from Michigan goes to Miami at the 18th pick. Very impressive. Micah Parsons ends up going to Washington to fill in that linebacking hole. The other part of it, the Bears needed an offensive line. I think Walker Little, I know a lot of people are not sold on that, but I think he's going to be one that I think works well with this team. Then Jason Away, another kind of sleeper pick for Indianapolis, but that usually does happen. Aziz Ojulari ends up going to Minnesota. Then the Jets go and get Travis Etienne. This is why I'm saying you go and get yourself that big time running back after you just got Zach Wilson to help with the run game. So I thought that was very impressive. Then, of course, Jeremiah Owusu-Koramoah goes to Cleveland. Rashad Bateman to Baltimore. Those were definitely the picks that was a must. They needed to have that happen. Greg Newsome from Northwestern goes to New Orleans because I just feel like Marshawn Lattimore is going to get traded. And I think it's going to be much to relieve of this cap hole. So I think ultimately when you look at this entire draft, these were some of the grades from here. So the Cardinals were sitting at a D+, Falcons at a D. Only ones that stand out: Baltimore, the Panthers, Bengals, Browns, Broncos, Lions, Packers, Colts, Jags, Chiefs, Dolphins, Vikings, Patriots, Saints, Giants, Jets, Raiders, Eagles, the 49ers, the Titans, and of course the Washington football team. So this is interesting how I just kind of saw all of this work out. But again, this is just only the first day. This is only just the first ever mock draft I've ever done, but I think it's rightfully so. I truly think that all these picks are exactly what each of these teams need. So I thought this was very impressive here tonight. I was very impressed with myself from there. Probably going to end up doing at least a little bit more knowledges on these mock drafts and a lot more player insight from this. But I thought this was fun, guys. And I think this really does addressed well with all of the issues that most of these teams do need, and they have. So really impressive stuff. So I really do appreciate you guys joining here on the Snake Sports Talk Show here tonight. Have a great night, and we will see you guys next time here on the Spotlight Sports Network. Take care.